there. But I just listened to your book. Like, your book is just fantastic. First of all, great read. Well, great listening, right? And you narrate it extremely well. So it's kind of really cool because, you know, you've done such an amazing lion's share of like work to get to where you are today in terms of not just in your coaching side, but in your knowledge side of how you become a better coach, and now you're a better speaker, better person, you know, better all-around engager, and now you're an inspiration to so many different companies and people and all that stuff, right? And I call it the pinch factor. Have you had to pinch yourself a couple times?
Yeah. I mean, when I look back on my journey and all of the different experiences I've had and people I've met and places I've been, that the game has taken me, considering that I was not an elite level player, it is pretty remarkable. And I would say I'm more thankful and appreciative than anything else. But yeah, there are definitely have been a handful of surreal moments that I'm like, I can't believe this is happening right now. And
dude, I mean, just
so
listen. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's just it. I mean, looking at your wall behind you, there's more than a handful there. And it's really kind of really cool because growing up, DeMantha was like it. Danny Ferry, he went to DeMantha, I think, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. So I often, when I remember standing in the old Cleveland Stadium or Coliseum or whatever it was, we went to watch Cleveland play somebody. We were down in Canton playing in a tournament, and this is in college. And I'm standing watching shoot around, and the guy kind of looks at me a couple times. This is when I had hair. He goes, "You're not Danny Ferry, are you?" I go, "I'm a little too short for Danny Ferry." Right? But we had the receding hairline, same haircut, you know, same good looks, all that stuff. But it was really funny because DeMantha was always such the gold medal standard. How did you end up where you're training the best of the best? How did that come about? Like you came out of college and how did that roadmap take you there?
Well, before I answer that, let me give one other kind of connection to Canada and DeMatha. But you see, Nate Darling from Nova Scotia played at DeMatha for 2 years. And then I see he just declared for the NBA draft from Delaware.
Wow.
All-time favorite kids and players. I was actually doing a clinic up in Halifax, and
really?
It was a young kid that came to the clinic. And I just vividly remember him showing, I get everywhere very early, especially if I'm the guy running the workout. And sure. I got there, an hour, 90 minutes early, and he's in the gym putting up shots and working on his game. And then we do a 3-hour workout, which was pretty intense, especially for someone as young as he was at the time. And then when everybody else clears out, he stays and continues working on his shot. And I got to know him over a couple of years of going back. And I remember him asking, what would it take to play at a DeMatha? And just even looking at him, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, because I love Nate. Like, he didn't pass the eyeball test of looking like a DeMatha basketball player. And I didn't think much of it, but he was so, persistent in reaching out and saying, he would love an opportunity to come to the States, and he believes he could play at a school like DeMatha. And, so I connected him to Coach Jones, and he basically sold Coach Jones on why he would, be an asset to DeMatha. And, he comes and he doesn't have a very large role when he first gets here, and he leaves as a starter and an all-conference player, and then earns a Division I scholarship. And now he's going to leave college early to throw his hat in the NBA arena. And for me to see a young child come in from putting in that type of work to hopefully hearing his name called by Adam Silver is really cool to see. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it's a neat piece of history that certainly connects Canada to DeMatha.
Well, that's a great story because it just goes to show you, like, that is kind of like the whole thing about your book. Like, it really talks about everything that he's done to get to where he is. Look where he is today, right? And like you said, the book, hey, the cover of the book doesn't necessarily, tell its contents, right? And I often feel, and I listened to a great podcast I listened to it live at the PGA show by Dr. Brett McCabe.
Oh yeah, I know Brett.
You know Brett? Yeah. So Brett's fantastic, right?
Yes,
great Southern guy, and got that great drawl. And he's talking about how you go to Korn Ferry Tour Q School, You got 6'6", 7 guys with perfect golf swings, hit at 320 in the air, right? But can't find the hole and don't know how to get through all this adversity. But the guy who's 5'10" with a little bit of a pot belly goes out and shoots, comes second, right? And qualifies for the PGA Tour. Often the looks are a lot deceiving. And you don't, I think that's just a wonderful story. And again, a Canadian, awesome, like so amazing to hear. And to go to Delaware, where another actually, a guy that came through in the 80s of high school in Toronto went down and played at Delaware. So, I mean, that's kind of a funny, connection there as well. But, it just lends itself to going, wow, you've really touched so many different lives in so many different ways. And I bet coming out of college, you weren't thinking this is where you'd be, 20 years later.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't exactly sure. And the cool part is I don't exactly know where I'll be 20 years from now. I do know who I want to be 20 years from now and the traits that I want to be associated with. So I live a life right now that's in alignment with becoming that person. And that's something we can dive into a little bit later. But
Sure.
to answer your question, the most important part, no matter how ambitious your goals are or whatever vision you have, and this will be true of me, and this will certainly parallel nicely with the story I just told about Nate, you have to work on embracing and starring where you are now before you try to leap forward and do something else. You need to focus. If you're a basketball player, you need to focus on the role you currently have and do that to the best of your ability before you can expect to have an expanded role. And same thing in the workplace. If you're one of those people that's only kind of giving half effort to your current company because you've always got one eyeball on a promotion or another company, then you're never going to be as good as you're capable of. So I certainly didn't graduate college and all of a sudden get handed a bunch of opportunities to work with elite level players. I had to earn those over time. And, I always felt for myself that the high school age was the best age for me to work with. I thought those were the most impressionable years, not just athletically, where you could kind of teach them proper movement mechanics and athleticism, but also from a mental and emotional standpoint. I thought I could be a more influential role model with kids that were 15 to 18 years old, as opposed to working with pros. So I chose to stay at the youth level, but was thankful enough to get some opportunities to work at DeMatha and work at Montrose Christian, where Kevin Durant went to school, and was able to work with NBA caliber players when they were 15 and 16 years old. And being able to work at 2 elite programs then opened the door to do some things at Nike and Jordan Brand and USA Basketball. And then those led to other opportunities. So it's all about doing the best you can with what you have where you are. If you would look at the roster of people that I trained my first year out of college, would not be, let's say, book worthy. I mean, they were just regular moms and dads and some low-level athletes. And I don't mean low-level as in not great people. I just mean they weren't playing at a very high level. And I did the best I could working on my craft there until I could slowly earn the right to work at bigger named programs with bigger name players. But the other thing you have to realize too, especially from a coaching standpoint, that the level that you're at or the level of player that you work with does not dictate whether or not you're a good coach. I know coaches
That's a great line.
Well,
Great.
There's so much truth to it. I know so many coaches that choose to coach at smaller schools or choose to coach younger children. And they're some of the best coaches that I've ever met. I think we just naturally assume this hierarchy that, NBA coaches are better than college coaches are better than high school coaches coaches are better than youth coaches, because generally speaking, that's the hierarchy of players. And you could make a legit argument that NBA players are better than college players and most college players are better than most high school players, but it's not the same with coaching. Like I said, I've met youth and high school coaches. I mean, Mike Jones, the head coach at DeMatha, is a perfect example. He's as fine as any coach I've ever met in any sport at any level. You better believe that if the Raptors called him tomorrow and said, we'd like to offer you an assistant coach position, he would add tremendous value to the Toronto Raptors organization. He's that good, but he chooses to stay where he is because that's what's best for him. And to me, that's what's most important. So to answer your question, how did I go from graduating college to being able to work with some of the best players in the world? Incrementally, step by step, brick by brick, focusing on where I was at the time, and then looking to expand what I was capable of doing just to open up doors for more opportunities. But you better believe that if I had not had an opportunity to train the guys that are on the pictures behind me, that wouldn't make me any less of a coach. Now it may make me less notable. It may be harder to get on stage to speak or to have a book deal if you don't have the cachet of some bigger names.
Yeah,
but that
right.
doesn't mean that I would be any less of a coach. I'm a big Duke fan. If Coach K left Duke tomorrow and decided to coach at the local public high school near me here in DC, that wouldn't mean he's any less of a coach. He'd be just as brilliant as he ever was. He just probably wouldn't, still make as many headlines as he does at Duke. So the level at which you coach has nothing to do with your competency and ability to coach.
I love that, Alan. That is absolutely gold, because we often sit here in the golf world and this is a discussion. Oh, I want to be out on tour coaching tour players. Well, I have a very close friend. He is probably one of the foremost best short game coaches on the planet. He's Irish, lives in Canada, lives in London, Ontario, small little hamlet. And he is on the LPGA tour, and he is the hottest short game coach. Jin Yun Ko, the Jerturnagarn sisters, Lydia Ko. The list he has is amazing. He is extremely humble, extremely grounded, knows his stuff. The interesting thing that he tells me, right? Like, he goes, I did this because I could help them. And I didn't go out and promote myself. They promoted me, because the results they were getting, these girls were getting with a couple that he got to start with, paid off, where he's coached 2 of the CME Globe winners over the last 3 years. Wow. Right? And the really cool thing is I can call him up and ask him questions about this, and he still takes my calls and all this stuff because he's a good friend.
I love it.
But the really cool part about this is, as coaches, right? I know for me, my bread and butter is 8 to 14. Mm-hmm. I am arguably the best junior golf coach in Canada between 8 and 14. I honestly think, and it's because of the relationships I've built with the kids, and to bring them along, it's way more, it warms the heart, yes, and your soul,
very satisfying,
help them through that. And you can affect them in so much greater different ways, right? Where you can then, if it comes time to pass them off to another coach, because maybe that person just has the next level a little bit better, mm-hmm, it's not a problem. You've done your part, right? And it's taken me a while to get to know that, because you want to hold on to them because they're your kid, right? And you honestly feel like you're attached to them. And it's like, it's really cool when I've had some go and some come back. Right. And then, you still have those great relationships with them, because that's just it. It's the relationship business. Right.
Yes.
So, you've done so much self awareness building, I would say. And that is one of the things I took from your book that is just an amazing component of, like, building self-awareness is massive. All right. And in golf, it's such a secular sport. And it really talks about how I think it's often missed by coaches. I don't believe that coaches grasp how to develop self-awareness in youth and kids. Mainly because it's not often talked about.
Right.
Okay. Like X's and O's, positions and stuff. Self-awareness is such a massive advantage for a coach who understands that, on how to build it into their athletes in any sport, really. What do you think are the 5 must things that a coach should try and do, if there's only 5, but 5 top things you could say to build into a young athlete or golfer? What do you think would Alan Stein would say?
Well, let's start with just the self-awareness portion. And this kind of piggybacks nicely on what we were talking about. It takes very high self-awareness for a coach to know what level are you a best fit for. What level is your personality and your skill sets most conducive for? I always use this example. I think Greg Popovich of the Spurs is one of the best professional sports coaches we've seen in the last 30 years. In any sport, I think he's absolutely brilliant. I think he'd even be willing to tell you he'd probably not be a very good youth coach, that if he was coaching kids 8 to 14, that's probably not in his wheelhouse and would not be what's best for him or for those kids. Same thing for someone that specializes at the youth level. Maybe coaching in the professional ranks is not what's best for them. So we all have to take ownership of that. And I also want to make sure people know that when I was describing that kind of hierarchy, there are absolutely brilliant basketball minds in the NBA, and there's
Oh, yes.
nothing wrong with someone wanting to be an NBA coach or wanting to be a college head coach. So this has nothing to do with, I'm not trying to encourage people to just do youth. You have to do what's best for you. I just want to make sure people know that just because you're at a certain school or in a certain league, that doesn't make you personally any better or worse as a coach. That comes down to what you actually bring every single day. As far as
But that brings back to that brings back to the self-awareness part, right?
Yes.
And I know you're going to talk about this, but that is the really big thing I find is you got to know who you are. Both you could be for an athlete and or as a coach to really know where your bread and butter lies. Sorry.
Yes. No, you're 100% on. And I think that's where coaches, I don't necessarily have a list of 5. I think what the coaches need to be able to do is constantly ask questions of their players, which will help reveal self-awareness, on a very acute level, in basketball, per se, since that's my wheelhouse, and I'll let you translate it to golf, because
Sure.
I've only played golf 2 times in my life, and it wasn't pretty either time. But
That's
in
funny.
basketball, when a player takes a shot, they need to know whether or not that was a good or bad shot to take. And whether or not it's a good or bad shot is dependent on their range, whether or not they were open, what's the time and score, what were the previous shots, were they in a rhythm? If they've hit their last 4 shots from that same spot and they find themselves open there for a 5th time, it's probably a pretty good shot to take. So if the player can decide whether or not it's a good or bad shot, and then does that mimic what the coach believes? Because if the player thinks that's a great shot and the coach thinks that's an awful shot, now we're not aligned, and that's showing lack of self-awareness. Same thing, a coach should constantly be asking reflective questions of their players for any trait that they want to know. What do you believe are your best skill sets? And maybe the kid says, I'm a pretty good communicator, or I have a good work ethic. And then see, is their evaluation of themselves aligned with the evaluation that the coach has for them? And this is not about them trying to pander to the coach. This is just, hey, how you feel about yourself and see yourself, is that congruent with the way the rest of the world sees you? And that's ultimately what self-awareness is. It's being able to say, oop, just lost my light. It's being able to say, this is what I do really, really well. And most of the world agrees this is what I do well. Here's some things that I really struggle with. And this is what the rest of the world agrees I struggle with. I mean, that by itself would be self-awareness.
Well, it's great. That's fantastic, because it's easily get your light. It's easily understood that when the self-awareness in a golfer, it can be often looked upon, because you made a good point in your book about how they're worrying about the results of their parents. Like, what are their parents thinking?
Yes.
I'm doing this from a golf side of things. What is the parent thinking? What is the coach thinking? What are other players thinking? What is the other player doing that's affecting my game? And it's really, I use this saying, it's your game, your way, with my kids.
Yeah.
Right? Because I often want them to understand, look, your way is your way. Don't worry what everybody else is doing. Pay attention to your own self game and how you get from point A to point B. They only really, this is kind of a trivia question for you. How many minutes in 18 holes are you actually just playing golf, Alan? Take a guess. So if a 4.5 hour round or 4 hour round of golf, how many minutes of those 4 hours are you actually playing the game?
2 minutes, 3 minutes.
That's close. It's not, that's a good, about 17. About 17.
So I undercut it. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Well, I wasn't sure what you were actually counting. Like, if it's literally just the time you're swinging, or you.
Yes.
I don't know. Okay, that makes sense.
It's just literally the time you're swinging.
Wow.
It's literally 17 minutes out of 4 hours.
Yeah.
So it's all the time in between that golfers have, right? And it's really an interesting point, because I think it leads me right into my other point about confidence and how it's such a valuable thing for golfers. And I know, coming from self-experience from basketball, having confidence, because I was a 3 guy, I'd come peeling off a screen. It'd be going up before I'd even, my feet are barely set, and it'd be going up, and I knew I'd be running down the court because it would be in.
Yeah.
I often love this story from Bob Rotella's Golf's Not a Game of Perfect, where he talks about, he had his student athlete stand up in his class at Virginia. Uh-huh. And he talks about how they were in the basketball championships, high school basketball championships, semifinal game. And he had gone 0 for 20 in the whole game. But they got the ball back with a chance to win with 20 seconds left. The coach went to run a play for a freshman. He turned to the coach, said, I want the ball. They said, okay. They ran the ball for him. 21st basket. He's 0 for 20. He makes the basket. They go on and win the state championship. And somebody in the class asked him, why did you want the ball? He goes, in high school, I was a 50% shooter.
Yeah.
So I knew that when I missed the first one, I would make the second one. And when I missed the second one, I was saying, man, I got to make the third one. When I missed the third one, I'm overdue. Absolutely. And it's called the shooter's mentality. And I can relate that certainly to golf, where I often try to say, hey, you need to take this and really work at the fact that, look, it may not be your day, but how you turn that into an advantage for you and what you can learn from it will aid you down the road. So that brings me to my question. Confidence can often be misconstrued as cockiness based on how they present it. And I often think that an athlete needs to really work on their craft a lot to make sure that that confidence is not something that is masked by the cockiness. What are a couple strategies that you've used to help your athletes get into that confidence side and really hone their craft?
Well, I believe confidence comes from one thing and one thing only, and that's demonstrated performance. And that comes through sheer repetition and pursuit of mastery, especially during the unseen hours. So, if you're a basketball player and you are in the gym when no one else is in there for hours on end, putting up game shots at game spots, game speed, you've earned the right to hit that 21st shot. You've earned the right to hit that game winner, and you know that. So I think that's where confidence is derived. I believe that what prevents confidence from going too far and becoming cockiness or arrogance is maintaining a level of humility and an openness to being coached, an openness to knowing that you can get better, and then an openness to saying, just because I deserve and have earned the right to make this last shot doesn't mean it's going to be handed to me, and doesn't mean it's just going to automatically go in. I need to be able to recreate what I've been practicing. So I need to make sure that, I've got good shooting form, and that my feet are set, and that I'm low when I make the catch, and I come off of that screen nice and tight. So having a humility will make sure that you don't think you're entitled to anything, and that nothing is going to be given to you. And I think that's what's most important. And it's a fine line with many of the best players in the world. I mean, whether you're talking about a Tiger Woods in his heyday or a Kobe Bryant in his heyday, I mean, I'm sure those guys teetered pretty close to going past confident and maybe being a tad arrogant or cocky at times. But generally speaking, I think they walked that fine line as well as anybody, which is why those guys were such high performers. They believe they earn the right to be successful, but they don't believe that success should just be given to them or handed to them in any given moment.
Well, you know what? This is actually perfect segue into my question, because one of the absolute best in the world of putting up those unseen shots, and by a golfer standpoint, it's, Tiger, he builds his own practice compound so he can go and do all those unseen shots that he comes back to win the Masters, which by far was the story of the year last year in golf. Absolutely, by far, to come back from as much as the tumultuous comeback, it's been amazing to watch. And so the really cool part was the master at unseen shots was no doubt the Black Mamba, Kobe Bryant. Rest in peace, an amazing man. And you've had the privilege of being around him. And I want you to explain to everybody the difference between a workout and a blackout.
Well, I think that's just kind of the mentality that he had. I mean, he believed in doing everything as game specific as possible, going as hard as possible in everything that he did. He understood the advantage of, or the mindset of creating so many disadvantages and adversities and challenges when he was working out and training and practicing, that the game almost became easy by default. I mean, he would want to put himself in positions where, he was absolutely mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. And then at the end of a 3-hour workout, he needs to make X number of shots in a row before he can leave, because then he knew that when the game came on, it'd be easier by default. So I think he just had an unparalleled approach to working on his craft. And that's one thing I want to make sure that folks understand. when you see somebody like a Kobe Bryant or a Tiger Woods, you shouldn't necessarily try to emulate them or be like them or copy their training program or copy their mentality. You know, I don't want a high school kid to go out now and think he needs to black out when he's working out. But what they need to do is try to look at some of the traits that those folks have and try to emulate those traits. You know, Kobe was very consistent with his workouts. I mean, he never missed workouts. Well, that's something I can try and emulate. I can try to make sure that I'm consistent with my workouts. You know, Kobe would give, you know, he would treat every single rep with the care and precision as if it was a game 7. And well, that's something I can emulate. You know, me now as a professional speaker, you know, I've got a handful of speakers that I really admire and respect. I mean, these guys and girls are so good at what they do, but I don't want to be them. I want to emulate a similar level of mastery of craft, you know, the way they own the stage and the way they deliver content in a compelling way. I want to be able to do it on that same level, but do it in a way that's very authentic and true to me and true to my content. So when you hear the folklore of a Kobe Bryant or a Tiger Woods, most people just want to jump out and mimic that and replicate that, but that's not what's most important.
That's awesome. You know, I couldn't agree with you more, because again, like I said earlier, it's like, you know, getting them to understand that it's their game, their way. So it's your game, your way. And it's like, it was so funny. We just before March break, our spring break here was the 15th of March. And I had 13 kids ready to go to Florida. And I got them all ball markers that said your game, your way on the back of it, and all that stuff. And unfortunately we couldn't go, but I mean, I can't wait to give them all to them when we get back out on the golf courses and really, you know, get them. It's the constant reminder, right? Because they need to realize that stop worrying what everybody else is doing, right? And concentrate on yourself. So here's an interesting question. So you have 3 kids. You have Luke, Jack, and Lila.
Yep.
You know, and having been being a successful athlete, I mean, you played college basketball and everything like that, and you want, you know, and the really cool part about this is myself, having played at college, won a national title, right? And I have 2 kids, Abby and Alex. They're 22 and 17, but I was always willing to let them choose their sport. You know, like I coached my daughter in soccer. They both tried basketball. I didn't coach them in basketball. I actually think that's a good thing. I let somebody else do that. And now in golf, it's an interesting point, because I never pushed them in golf. Mm-hmm. And I never, you know, said, you got to come with me or do whatever that. But they can play it if they want to, right? Because they're athletic and all that stuff. So how about you with your kids? You know, because your kids are, I believe, 10 and under. They're all under 10. Yeah.
Boys are 10, daughters 8. Yep.
That's right. Exactly. So you got twins. It's like, how are you shaping these kids' sports lives as a uber, I would say, now I mean this as a compliment, as an uber elite speaker, athlete, motivator, and also coach at such a high level? Is it a struggle?
No, because I'm very hands off with it. I mean, I want my children to know that as their father, I'll do everything I can to afford them opportunities, you know, opportunities to play different things and try different things. I encourage them to do that, but it's completely up to them what they do. They've tried different sports, and some of them they've liked and continued to do, and some of them they haven't and may not do them again. I also realize my kids are so young that it's too early for me to try to label them or shoehorn them in one direction, or, you know, I've got to realize that, you know, my kids might like a sport now that they're not very good at, but if they put in enough work, in a few years, they could be pretty decent at it. Or there might be a sport or an activity now that they show some, you know, some initial natural promise towards, but they might get burnt out of it and sick of it when they get older. So I just want my kids to find their own way. Really and I say sport, but I'm talking about any activity. I mean, whether this is music or dance or
absolutely
something in the arts. You know, when I look back on my own childhood, I was very one-dimensional. It was sports. That was it for me. I didn't try anything else. I wasn't interested in art or music or anything. And now there's just so many different opportunities for kids. But the template doesn't change. And really what I say is, look, if you decide to do something, play something, or sign up for a class or be a part of a team, you have to finish that season or finish those lessons, whatever it may be, because other people are counting on you. But then when that season's over, if you don't want to play it again, that's completely up to you. But, you know, you can't say you want to try baseball and then get 2 weeks into it and say you don't want to play baseball anymore. That would be going back on your commitment. So that's one rule. And then outside of that, really my kids know, and they can say them. They'll say them probably with an eye roll when I ask them now, but there's really just 4 rules that I ask them of everything that they do, sport or other type of activity, at the end of it. Did you have fun? Did you do the best you were capable of doing? Were you a good teammate? And did you listen to your coach or teacher or instructor, whatever the word may be? Those are the only 4 things that I care about. I don't care if they win or lose. I don't care how many minutes they play. I don't care if they get a trophy. I don't care if they score point. Like, none of that matters to me. As long as you have fun, you give your best effort, you're good to the people around you, so you're a good teammate, and you listened to your coach, that's cool. And and I tell them, as long as you do those 4 things, then your mother and I will continue to pay for you and will continue to drive you to those 2 things.
That's awesome.
As soon as you don't do those 4 things, then we're cutting you off. Like, I'm not going to pay for something if you're not having fun. I'm not going to pay for something if you're not even going to give it a good effort. I'm not going to pay for something if you're not good to the people around you. If you're being selfish and that's not cool. And I'm certainly not going to pay for something if you're not coachable or you're not listening to the people that are, for the most part, volunteering their time to help you. And my kids know that and understand that. And what a lot of people make the mistake of believing is they think that those 4 questions are just important to me now because my kids are 10 and 8. What they don't know is those will be the only 4 questions I ask them for the rest of their life. Like, I don't care if they show promise to be elite level basketball players. The only 4 things that will matter to me are those 4 questions. I'm not real worried about winning games or trophies or scoring points, because those things will become a natural byproduct of the 4 questions. The only way, and I'll just keep using basketball because that's the lens at which I see everything.
No, it's all good.
The only way my children could potentially be great basketball players is if they have fun playing, is if they work hard every time they go out, is if they're good teammates, because basketball is a team sport, and is if they're coachable and let people continue to pour into them and guide them. So those 4 questions aren't going to change with me. And I'm hoping that them hearing that now will plant the seed that when they're older, that's kind of the metric at which they use to make their own decisions. Because I believe my number 1 job as a parent, outside of keeping my children physically safe, is to teach them how to make good decisions and be free thinkers on their own. So whenever they fly the coop when they're 18 years old, I hope I've armed them with the ability to make good decisions. And that's most important, because at the risk of making life seem too simple, if you make good decisions consistently, you have a pretty good life. If you make really poor decisions, even just once, you could completely undermine your life. So that's really all I'm looking to do as a father.
Cool. Well, you know what? That's absolute, like, gold standard parenting advice across the board there, Alan. And John O'Sullivan would be very proud of all those that you said. It's like, wow, are you doing like a promo for Changing the Game Project book right there? That's pretty awesome. But
it's funny you mentioned that, because I actually do have a self-published book that I wrote with a friend of mine that we've only postponed the launch because of COVID-19, since kids aren't actually playing sports now. But that was basically a section of the book, what I just said. It's called The Sideline, and it's a guide for youth sports parents.
Oh my gosh!
Send me how they can. Yeah,
please.
It's going to be pretty solid. And I don't say any of this, I don't know any more about parenting than anyone else. I mean, I'm learning as I'm going, just like every other parent.
Sure.
But I have, from a youth sports parenting standpoint, I've been around youth athletics at the highest level long enough to know that the parents that don't focus on fun, work ethic, being a good teammate, and being coachable, when they focus on things outside of that, there's usually some type of problem or dysfunction. That if they're too worried about their kid getting a scholarship, or they're too worried about their kid's playing time or points scored, it's going to undermine something at some point. So this is not me feeling so self-righteous that I'm telling people how to parent their children. This is more as a performance coach saying, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly with sports parents. And here's what I believe after 20 years of work, and as a father myself, I believe are some guidelines that will help you make the youth sporting experience the most positive possible for your child. And that's all I'm looking to do.
That is absolute, like I said, gold. And I mean, it is rampant in the golf industry of teaching juniors and stuff like that. You always get the parents. So what do you think? Think you got a chance? What? She's 10. Right. What do you expect? Like, chance of what? Getting better? Yeah, sure. when they're talking about like what schools should she go to, I say, what are you talking about? You need to just relax. Like it's having these parents realize like, whoa, check yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a really important point, because then they put expectations, right? So like you win a few tournaments, oh, you should be winning all the time. Why are they not winning? Well, maybe because they've grown 5 inches in 6 months and their center of mass has gone this way, and like they're all out of sorts, right? Even though they were an amazing, coordinated person. It's just crazy. All right, so here's my favorite part of my chats when I have people on and interview them.
Sure.
It's a fast 5. So what it is 5 questions that are pretty. I've done a little bit of homework and I kind of want to see what you're going to come up with, but
Sure.
answer them as best as you can. All right. So number 1, your starting 5 best players you've worked with in your career in basketball. Who's your starting 5?
As far as best as in most accomplished, as far as
like who do you think would be your best starting 5?
Oh man, I don't know if I could even do it by position. I mean, the most notable
Just
player
say 5.
that actually worked as I was their high school strength coach. I'll narrow it down to that, because I've done one-offs with a bunch of other players. But as far as kids that I actually worked with in high school, Kevin Durant, Terrence Ross, Justin Anderson, Markelle Fultz, Victor Oladipo. And,
Amazing.
and I'd say Jeremy Grant and Quinn Cook coming off the bench.
Boy, those are 7 awesome players, right? I mean, that's just fantastic. T. Ross, Raptor.
Absolutely.
Anyways, who's Alan Stein Jr.'s hero?
Oh, hero is an interesting word. I don't know. I know absolutely growing up, I would have said Michael Jordan. And I think most people around my age that were interested in basketball would say that. So certainly now at the time of this recording, as I'm watching the Last Dance docuseries on ESPN, I mean, it is just bringing back so many memories. I mean,
doesn't it though?
They'll show a play and I'll have this visceral response of remembering where I was sitting on the couch watching a big tube television, being a teenager. I mean, it's really remarkable. So I would say for the first part of my life, it was definitely Michael Jordan. For the next portion of my life as a coach, it was Coach K. And these are just people from afar. I mean,
Sure.
my parents are people that have had, tremendous influence, and I've had so many other mentors and colleagues, but I would say most notable would probably be Michael Jordan and Coach K.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so great. So your boy, Jesse Isler is, got a little bit of a rapper kind of, upbringing, start, right?
Yeah.
However, I'm not sure if you know this part. Kanye, Nicki Minaj, Drake, Lil Wayne, and Big Sean all have made references to Stan Van Gundy in their rap songs.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So if you were going to get rapped, if a rapper was going to mention Alan Stein Jr., who would you want doing the rap about Alan Stein and having your name rapped out by?
Well, I'm a guy that I appreciate strong lyricists. So I'm a huge Eminem and Jay-Z fan. If I had to pick my top 2, they'd be those 2. The only reason I wouldn't put Biggie or Tupac in there is I just don't think they lived long enough to have the breadth of work that Eminem and Jay-Z have had. I mean, you're talking about guys that are well over 2 decades in the field. So either one of them, since I consider them the best 2 guys in the game, if either one of them mentioned me, I think it'd be cool. But if your listeners are not familiar with NF, he is absolutely remarkable. I think he's my favorite hip hop artist or rapper at present. All of his lyrics are clean. So I listen to him with my children. I was going to take my kids down to Jacksonville, Florida to go to an NF concert. Unfortunately, it got canceled because of the COVID-19. But he is an absolute wordsmith. He's a genius with lyrics. Like he's phenomenal. And I think over the next several years, he's going to become a mainstay in pop culture.
I'm gonna go look him up on iTunes as soon as we get off this call.
Please do.
I absolutely, for sure. Getting back to Eminem, I would not agree with you more of those 2. I actually had Jay-Z in my head when I wrote that question for you. I actually thought Jay-Z. Eminem, without a doubt. I still will watch the Final Battle rap scene to 8 Mile in every single time it goes out. Absolutely, by far, the best rap scene in any movie I've ever seen in my life.
It's so good.
All the time, right?
Well, one thing, and I don't want to sidetrack us because I know there's supposed to be a fast 5, but I've learned over time, I can separate content from craft. So I certainly don't agree or endorse everything that Eminem says.
Oh
But as
no,
far
no.
as the craft at which he says it and the way that he's able to bend words and change his tonality and flow as a speaker, as someone that makes his money speaking, I study hip hop very closely because I think those guys and what they're able to do with spoken word is just
Mhm.
remarkable. And I mean, just the imagery at which they paint, and especially as of late, I mean, Eminem with some of his songs, I mean, he changes his style of rap, he changes the speed. I mean, that song Godzilla, again, content aside, what he's able to do lyrically and phonetically is just on
Mhm.
another level. I've never seen anything like it.
I would have to agree with you. You know what? He is such an icon in this business, and really, it just like you said, the content being what itself, just the how he does it, the how and where. Yeah, it's fantastic. All right, this is a little different. What's your favorite chocolate bar you've ever had?
Probably Kit Kat. I like Heath Bar.
Cool.
And I definitely like anything with a peanut butter component to it. So
Oh,
I know
join the
Reese's
club.
cups, Reese's peanut butter cups are
Yes,
not technically a bar, but they're pretty good.
that's okay. I fortunately have two kids who have peanut allergies, so I have to sneak them.
Oh,
Yeah,
gotcha.
buddy. But all right, now last one. Describe a perfect day for Alan Stein Jr.
Wow. There's several different scenarios that I think would be an amazing day. I mean, first and foremost, I love my children very much and I love spending time with them. But I like actually doing things. Like I think a perfect day would be we wake up. I'm not very good in the kitchen, although during this COVID-19, I've had to do more cooking than I've ever done in my life and less ordering out. So maybe make some pancakes with them. And then I love watching them do what they love to do. So for the sake of me curating my perfect day, maybe my kids have a basketball game and after making
Awesome.
pancakes, I just go sit and watch them play. And then maybe my daughter does something, an activity after that. And then maybe we go do something like ride bikes or do something outside and then come home and make some food and then kind of curl up and watch a movie that gets them just as excited as movies in the 80s and 90s got me. On one hand, that would be an awesome day.
For sure.
On the other hand, one of the things I've realized during COVID-19 is how much I miss being on stage speaking, how much I
Hmm.
love it. It's
Hmm.
helped me realize that speaking is what I do. It's not who I am. So that's why I'm trying to do as many of these types of calls as possible because this actually fills my bucket every bit as much as I'm hoping it fills yours and your audiences. I love doing this,
100%.
but boy, do I miss the craft of speaking. So, I would love to be able to fly to a cool location and experience the local culture and then get on stage in front of an audience that is in alignment with the stuff that I share. Because for me, since I'm not going to be Eminem and I'm not going to be Jay-Z or Tiger Woods or Kobe Bryant, the next closest thing I have is being on stage with 1,000 eyes on me, kind of nodding in acknowledgement when I'm sharing something. I mean, it's a sense of fulfillment and almost an intoxicating high, if you will, that I
Mm.
absolutely love. And then being able to get off stage and just mingle with a few people who are kind enough to come up and share a story. Alan, you said this made me think of my kid who once did, like, I love that. So either one of those scenarios, I'd consider perfect days. But here's where I'm very fortunate. Those 2 days, they actually happen fairly often. Like I didn't dream up something, like spending a day in the Maldives,
No, no,
that may
no.
happen at some point, but both of those perfect days, when we're not in COVID-19, I actually get to live those days, which is my roundabout way of saying I've got a really good life and I'm very, very thankful for it.
That's fantastic. You know what? Again, great answers to great, like those are just fantastic answers. And you're preaching to the choir with regards to standing up in front of people and motivating them. And, I taught college for 16 years and, would have over 400 young men and women come through my golf management program. And yes, I got to teach a really cool class and it was golf swing fundamentals. But the cool part is I'm still, I still have contact with probably half of them, if not more.
So
Right.
great.
And some of them I've mentored to, to better positions and all this stuff. But it's literally standing up. I know exactly what you're talking about with regards to the energy you get. COVID-19 and being inside. This is why I'm actually doing what by doing these and hosting these chats. it's giving me an opportunity to continue the sociability that I love.
Yes.
Friday, I had Donovan Bailey on.
Oh, nice.
He's one of my good friends. We've known each other for years. And it was really cool because, you know, like we're the same age, and yet we got to relive a little bit of his story and talk a little bit about it. And how the really funny thing is there's a great story about where my wife, actually, before I met my wife went to high school with him and his buddies.
Oh, wow.
And she was dating a guy. They were all at this house party one night. She was there with her dad's new Monte Carlo. And the thing is that she had a little too much to drink. So Donovan and his two buddies drove my wife home and left the Monte Carlo parked in the driveway, keys in the car on the seat, and my wife passed out in the passenger seat.
Oh, wow.
And then walked home, right? And this is like 1985, right? 1986 in Oakville, Ontario, which is a small little hamlet. But they were just such good guys, right? It's just a really cool story, right? And this is even before I even got to know them. So I mean,
awesome.
You know, it was really cool to have them on. But this is, like you said, the connection stuff, right? And it's really an important point because this connecting stuff, and I was actually, man, this is just segueing right into my next question, which is really kind of cool. So you've been zooming, supporting, boosting everybody, right? And, you know, I've been doing the exact same and stuff. But, you know, when you're working with an athlete, you know, do you find you are in contact with them outside of their workouts and outside of what they're training? Like, do you find you're, you know, hey, what'd you do today? You know, or to ensure that connection and they realize that they are the most important thing to you right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I treat everyone, athlete aside. I mean, I want folks to know, I mean, if we use athlete as an example, you know, I need to make sure they know unequivocally that I care about them as a human being first and an athlete second. So yeah, constantly just checking in. And I've been doing that more than ever during COVID-19. Since we can't see folks physically, is just reaching out and saying, you know, how are you doing? And then listen, you know, it's not one of the loaded questions where, you know, even like a speaker, most speakers get on stage and they say, hey, how's everybody doing? They're not really asking. That's just a line that they use. I mean, first of all, if you're asking 100 people, are you going to sit there and wait till 100 people tell you how they're doing? It's just a line. And if you and I worked in the same office, most people would just, you know, hey, good morning. Hey, what's going on? How you doing? I'm probably going to walk by you before I'd even give you a chance to answer. So now it's more of I just want to check in and see how you're doing with everything, and then be quiet and just let them answer and kind of take a pulse and see, you know, because there's a wide spectrum of, you know, you have some people right now that are optimistic and positive and in good spirits. And then you have other people that are on the exact opposite end of that. You know, they're borderline depressed, they're anxious, they're disappointed, they're worried, they're down in the dumps. And it's also important to know that any single one of us can go through a range of those emotions on any given day. Most people that know me will describe me as high energy, optimistic, and positive. And I agree. I am absolutely those three things to my core. But you better believe over the last 8 weeks, I have had many moments of despair. I've had many moments where I felt down in the dumps. I felt anxious about my business. I felt disappointed and sad that I can't speak. You know, so it's okay to have those feelings. And I think the key to connection, the key to leadership, the key to coaching is constantly reaching out to forge those stronger connections. And when you can't do them in person, then you do them digitally, you know, but I want to know when, you know, and I don't train athletes at present, but when I was training, you know, when a kid would come in, I could just ask a couple of questions and their answers would give me some insight into what type of workout we were going to have. You know, how are you doing? You know, how are things at home? Did you get good sleep last night? Hey, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? Hey, how did that, you know, history test you told me about, how did that go? And their answers to that would let me know a little bit of insight into their mindset at present. You know, if someone says, you know, coach, I was up all night last night, I haven't been feeling well, I didn't eat breakfast, and I failed my test, then I know going into it, this workout's probably not going to be the best workout they've ever had. They're probably going to be lacking a little bit of effort and attitude. They're probably not going to set any PRs that day, but that would give me important information for me to mold around that workout and be able to say, okay, if that's where they are, how do I meet them where they are and give them what they need so that we can make this workout the best that it can be, you know, and that's so important. Last thing I'll say, you know, especially with what's going on now, if you are personally at this moment kind of down in the dumps and a little depressed and a little anxious and a little worried, and I call you and I'm happy-go-lucky, Mr. Optimist, Mr. Positive, I'm trying to pump you up, that's square peg, round hole. That's probably not going to be a good fit. And that will actually damage our relationship, because you'll think that I'm not empathetic. I'm not compassionate. I'm not in tune with where you are. I'm tone deaf. Whereas if I ask you how you're doing and you tell me that's where you are, and then I kind of come to your playground to play, now I'm going to have that connection, and I'll find out, okay, what do you need right now? Maybe you just need an ear so you can vent or cry or laugh, or maybe you do need a little bit of a pick me up, and then I can give that in an appropriate dosage and not go totally over the top, Tony Robbins style. So I think it's really important to be able to take these litmus tests and to constantly reach out and see how folks are doing now more than ever. But even when things go back to normal, it's a good practice we should all have.
That's fantastic stuff. And actually, I have a very close friend who, admittedly suffers from, some form of mental illness, has done so throughout his life. And, it's like yesterday, I just, I sent him a text and said, "Hey bud, how's Brad?" And, like, "How you doing?" And he's, he came back to me, "I'm doing okay. Things can be going right." And again, a really great point about not being my normal self, who, I'm exactly like you, outgoing, energetic, always positive, right? And, very much a high energy kind of person. And I know with him, it's like you lead him on to kind of find out, "Hey, how you doing? What's new? What's going on? Can I do anything for you?" Just to say, "Hey, listen, man, if you want to chat, I'm here. You know what? Let you know, I love you, man," and all that stuff, right? Because it's not necessarily always be, like I found when we were busy working in our jobs, teaching and coaching and stuff, I would probably call him on the way into work, or on the way home from work, just to talk about stuff. And it was interesting because now I'm not talking to him more than maybe once a week,
right?
And we're home more where we actually have more time, but we're both doing our own thing. Like, he's actually working at his golf course, cutting the greens, helping the maintenance staff, because their staff is the maintenance staff is considered essential service because they don't want the grass to die, so they can cut the greens. Well, he can go out and help the golf course get ready, right? And so I'm just letting him do his thing. But again, it's the check-ins with these people, especially now, like you said, it's so important to make sure that you have those connections and where we're going. All right, so I loved your story when I listened to the Way of Champions podcast with John O'Sullivan. Your story about working with Kevin Durant for the very first time, and it referenced the point where you were a coach at that time. Whereas if they weren't dead inside 20 minutes, you didn't feel like you were doing a good job, right?
Yeah.
But you got a lot better, because you said, "I realized that wasn't exactly where you should be as a strength and conditioning coach."
Yes.
And I found it very, very introspective as a coach, right? Because it takes a lot to be able to look at oneself and go, "Whoa, yeah, maybe this kid shouldn't be on the ground wanting to puke," right? But what did you do to start changing your coaching to make it more about how it made you feel like you were making a difference in a better way rather than just killing them?
Oh, most certainly. And one thing, let me just plant a seed. I've only got a few more minutes after this question. So after this question, I can do one more question,
no
and then I've got something else cooking.
No worries,
but to answer your question about KD, that was just kind of the impetus to me realizing that I was just using the wrong measuring tool of what was an effective workout. I was looking very short term, and I thought, somebody getting, feeling nauseous or they couldn't stand up because their legs were shaking. It was kind of this almost caveman approach of this barbaric mentality of that's what it meant to be a good workout. And it was all just in the acute, that if someone was really sore the next day, that meant it was a great workout. And that was just from lack of maturity and lack of experience on my end. As I got older and I started to realize the short term's not near as important as the long term. And long term, here is where I want this player to be. So how can today simply be another brick on that wall? Where do I need to place this brick, and how do I need to place it to make sure that it's adding to this wall? And sometimes that is a really intense, grueling kick in the butt workout. Other times it's not. It's less volume or less intensity or focus on something different. So, for me, it was that mindset. One of the things that I've always had such tremendous respect to bring this full circle about the kind of Canadian philosophy and training is the LTAD, the long-term athlete development model that I know many programs in Canada have followed for most of my career. And once I was turned on to that, I was like, okay, this makes much more sense. This is not about coming in and just beating kids up. This is about coming in and giving them what they need to progress to where they're trying to go. It's all about them, and it's not about me. And I think that as a coach is the most important mindset to have. And once again, this does not mean that every time an athlete comes in that you're just kind of prancing on daisies. I mean, sometimes you need to lay the wood and make it a really intense workout, but you're doing that because within the overall context, that's what the athlete needs at that time. It's not just every time someone comes in, I'm going to lay the hammer. And if they crawl out of here, then I'm a good coach. That was an incredibly immature way for me to view it. And thankfully I came to my senses earlier rather than later in my career.
Well, I think I can say this in conclusion, that because you came to your senses earlier in your career than later, it helped shape you into the person who is now going across the globe, inspiring so many different people, myself included, to become a better coach, become a better athlete, become a better person, become in general. I mean, this hour has flown by in a heartbeat.
It does go by quick, doesn't it? Which is awesome. I've had so much fun.
It's so cool, man. And I can't thank you enough for your time. You know what? I'm going to leave it with this. Success is not an accident. Success is a choice. The standards you set today are the who and where you are tomorrow. And I got to tell you, you are living, breathing evidence of your quote, Alan Stein Jr. I can't thank you enough for spending this time with me and sharing so many insights. Everybody, go get his book. Okay, it is amazing. And what's the name of the book that's coming up that you've put a hold on?
So the next one, it's called The Sideline, and it's aimed at youth sports parents, and that'll hopefully drop early this fall. And anyone interested in Raise Your Game, you can just go to raiseyourgamebook.com. I've actually had several orders, team orders, go to Canada over the last couple weeks.
Awesome.
And I really and truly appreciate your support and your kind words. Thank you for kind of lending me your audience for an hour and allowing me to share. As I mentioned, this has been just as fulfilling and uplifting for me as I hope it's been for them and for you. And lastly, I'll say I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on the major social channels. So if anything struck a chord and anyone wants to continue a discussion, just drop me a line on any of those social channels, and I would love to continue.
Well, thank you so very much. Continue being awesome. Go have some fun with your kids. And I look forward to talking to you another time.
You got it. Thank you.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.